episode 220 of the Downward Facing Spiritual Spiral podcast. I'm Eddie Cohn, the host, producer, creator of the show. The show's almost about 3 years old. Can't believe it. Can't believe I've hit record 220 times. And as always, it's such a joy bringing this show to the airwaves, quote unquote. And it's always a joy to bring special people onto the show. And I'm thrilled to welcome Emily Goodson back onto the show. She was I keep saying show. She was on the podcast about 3 months ago. And we had a great chat. So definitely go back and listen to that one. But I potentially think this one is just as stimulating, maybe even more thought-provoking than our other one. We really have this way of touching on some pretty challenging topics, confusing topics, and I think it's really a thought-provoking discussion about technology, awareness, health, alternative ways to find health and balance. I think we live in a world now with a lot of systems in place, be it the technological systems, the healthcare system, the educational system. And it's okay if you want to sort of create your own path, create your own algorithm. And that's sort of a main theme in our discussion. Emily, by the way, is a public speaker. She is a writer. She had an amazing article published in the LA Times. She also writes on Medium. And I'll read this from her website, which is ecgoodson.com, and that's ecgoodson.com. She had a brain injury at the age of 8, which kickstarted an incredible adventure to better understand identity and abilities. Some perceive any difference from mainstream abilities to be a limitation. In reality, though, perception is often misleading. Through my speaking, writing, and advising, I teach others to find the hidden value and different thread in their own lives. And I think that's another topic that she and I touch on. You know, I had an autoimmune condition that I was dealing with for many years. And at first, when I was much younger, and I think like many of us, we think about our shortcomings, our quote-unquote illnesses or sort of ailments as a crutch. But I think you can turn a corner where they actually serve as a stepping stone or a way to help people reach growth, depth, and strength. And that's how I feel right now, and I think Emily feels the same. Certainly it takes a lot of work to get there, and we're all obviously still struggling on our daily paths, but I think Emily's story is really inspirational, empowering. I think our conversation is a really important reminder to listen to your own instincts, listen to your heart, your feelings about your own path, your own body. You don't have to be like everybody else. You don't have to listen to these systems and institutions that we've lionized over the years. I think we're all very different. There's a lot of nuance between one person and the next. So I think it's a pretty powerful talk, and I really appreciate Emily taking the time. I get the sense she'll probably be back on the show again because I really enjoy speaking to her about these very complex philosophical topics. So again, you can find Emily at her website, ecgoodson.com. She's also on social at ecgoodson. You can find me, of course, at Eddie Cohn or the Spiritual Spiral Podcast. Please, any questions, send them my way on social. If you'd like, and this would be incredibly helpful, head over to iTunes or Google Play and write a review for this show or share it with your friends. I know there's about 35 million podcasts, so your support is incredibly helpful, and I appreciate it. I have a new book called SSAFY that's available on Amazon or ssafyoga.com. Emily, again, thanks for taking the time to be a part of the show. And as always, thanks to you for listening, supporting, being a part of the Downward Facing Spiritual Spiral podcast. I always sort of like jump into the podcast because I often think about people's attention spans.
Yeah.
And like something bothers me about a podcast. Like I'll turn it on in the first like 5-10 minutes. Often the guests are just saying, "So how was your week?" or "How's it going?" And it's sort of like, I don't care. I just want to get to the nitty gritty. You know, I wanted to start by responding to your question about capturing some video to release, to sort of, as marketing for our
tease it up.
Yeah. And so this is something, and we're already recording right now, just to let you know, something that I really struggle with as a society is the focus on the visual. And it's sort of like if music does not have a video component to it anymore, I don't think people can. It's almost like they're not. The music is not powerful enough on its own. It's like we have this Van Gogh immersive experience, and it's like Van Gogh on its own is no longer good enough. And I was thinking even about captions on reels, and I throw on captions, but I was sort of thinking like, gosh, can anybody absorb information without visually seeing it? It's something that I struggle with. Now, I'm not ignorant in the sense that I realize that video to promote information is clearly valuable in this day and age. But my heart sort of there's 2 points that I want to make. My heart breaks because as a musician and as somebody that really relies on my ears so much, like I feel like I was a dog in another lifetime. I feel very conflicted when I am adding to this world that I see that is so superficially based and visually based. And so I also think nuance and intimacy changes if we know that the camera is on. And so I was just also a little conflicted. Like if the camera is on this whole time, like clearly it's on because you and I are talking.
Right.
But I think people act differently when a camera is on. So those are my 2 points. Chew on it. What do you agree with? Just maybe you disagree with the whole thing. Just what are your thoughts?
There's a lot there. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, so much is changing right now, and so much technology is like causing us to change and shift and redefine roles and all of that, as you and I have talked about, and as we're well aware. And one of the things that I've been thinking about related to media and technology, because I don't disagree with you. Like, I don't disagree that there does appear to be this like penchant right now for video stimulation, in your face kind of, watching. And we talked about this last time, right? Like we talked about it with like, nobody likes to listen to a record, a vinyl anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's like a lost art of listening to a vinyl versus like on my iPhone, I can be like, skip, and so that's interesting from a societal perspective to like think about how that media is affecting our attention span. The other argument, or like what I would challenge you on some of that is, we also have to meet people where they are, right? And if we have a message that we think is important, which comes through in your music or comes through in my speaking or my writing, part of me is like, I have to meet people where they are, and I have to accept that right now a large majority of the population is stimulated visually, and that's how maybe I draw them in. It's a tricky line, right? Like, I mean, it's a line of like, where do you hold your standard and where do you meet people where they are?
Boy, that's the $1 million question that and here's the thing though, you said meeting them where they are. Yeah. I don't think people, this sounds so dystopian. I don't think people even know like what's going on. Like I don't even And I know that sounds, and again, I'm not coming from a place of pretentiousness or like I'm better than. What I see happening is a dwindling of subtext, of nuance, sitting still. And so,
Yeah.
you're right. We in this case are giving them the technology or the visual because that's where our culture is right now.
Yeah.
But are we perpetuating it? It's
Yeah. I know. This is why I love our chat, Betty. We just get straight to it.
yeah.
Right. It's a huge philosophical question. And I had a little a gem I've been storing up for you because I heard this earlier this week and I knew it would interest you. I was a clip actually, a video clip actually. So what I was saying, Jordan Peterson, he had this clip and he said that we have created, or what we don't think about is that social media has like an unconscious built into it, right? And that kind of took me back for a second because I was like, that's kind of terrifying, right? Like this idea of like, we all have subconscious thoughts, right? Like we all do, but I'm an aware enough person that I can kind of catch myself in a fear pattern, right? Like I can catch myself and think, okay, I'm like, you shouldn't go down that rabbit hole of if this, if this, if this. But we don't know how that works in the social media space, right? Like it's some kind of weird algorithm of a bunch of people who created it. And then it's like what you click on and what you're probably saying out loud and the phone picks up on.
Right.
Like it took me back at that. I don't know what you think about but it was just this interesting thought to me of like, yeah, I mean, this machine of social media kind of has its own like subconscious built into it.
Do you care what people think? Like, is that something that you've been aware of childhood or in college or in your 30s now? I mean, is it something? Because I guess my point is that I'll personalize it with a quick anecdote. I just recorded a new sort of demo or song, and I shot a video of myself playing it, and I'm really proud of it. And I was going to post it on Instagram a couple days ago, but then I realized I am going to look to my phone for the response, and I'm maybe not even immediately, but maybe a couple days later, and I don't like how it sort of takes my personal journey of creativity, makes it public. Although I love performing, that's the strange sort of paradox here. Is I love DJing and I love singing, but there's something about that machine and like who's it feeding it to, and then it
Right.
connects me to the phone. It's sort of like I don't like how it sort of rips my heart and head into different pieces. It's strange.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. For me, I mean, of course, growing up, I care about people, of course, right? And there's still certain people in my life who I am always going to care what they think because I respect them so much. And, maybe that's good, bad. The other, it's funny. I wrote something yesterday actually about one of my New Year's resolutions for this year was to like detach from what people think of me. And that's hard, right? I mean, we're wired for connection and like wired to seek approval to some degree. But yeah, for me with this social media stuff is I've tried to find ways to transcend it, right? And like try and remember like, okay, this is not real. Like Emily on Instagram is not the real Emily.
Right.
Eddie on Instagram is not it's a kind of a 2D representation of us.
Well,
maybe.
wait, let me push back a bit.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like oh, yes, sure, you're a video component of yourself, much like I would be on Instagram. But, I get the sense that I mean, yes, like I'm probably portraying a more quote unquote confident or outspoken or outgoing person, but I don't know. I feel like we're similar to who we're portraying on Instagram.
That's fair. I mean, you're right. I mean, you're right. I'm not saying I'm inauthentic on Instagram. Like I totally everything I post is like my authentic writing, my authentic kind of voice. I guess what I'm saying is like I had to transcend that idea of like the likes and the
Hmm.
comments and all of that is not real, right? Like who it shows up like for instance, I had a reel the other day or wait from when I was in New York about this amazing museum I went to that's all about Himalayan art and like healing. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Instagram hated the reel for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Nobody didn't show it to anyone. Nobody liked it. Nobody got like 200 views compared to one of my reels about my travel got 13,000 views. I mean, it's just it's random, right? But that's what I guess I'm saying is like it's I've tried to transcend that caring about social media by reminding myself like this is not real. Whoever's profile or homepage this ends up on, like it's a crapshoot.
Yeah,
I mean, well,
but here's the thing.
yeah,
But that's why I struggle. Like here, I am a relatively confident adult, and I still am affected by, I am felt so empowered and passionate about these new songs that I'm writing, and yeah, part of me feels like it's important to have people see that I'm writing new music, and I'm sort of in this process of potentially recording a new record. But I am a confident adult, but similarly to you, like I see those numbers at the bottom of the reel, and it does make me, it places a value on what I posted, and I don't know if I'm able to transcend that, the power of that number. And
yeah.
I mean, did you feel like your ego, or did you feel your emotionality was sort of like affected that day when you posted that and saw that that number sort of paled in comparison to other reels?
I didn't. I didn't, but I do think I've been able in the past couple months to kind of transcend this.
Hmm.
I 100%. A couple years ago, I would have been like, oh my gosh, like why not?
Yeah, well,
Or why don't I?
how do you think you've transcended it?
I really look. I've reframed how I look at social media, and it's interesting. I'm kind of reframed. I think how I've looked at all technology right now is. And it's interesting getting back to that, what you were saying about intimacy and connection, right? Because, like, that's very much what I crave in my life. I mean, that's what I wrote about. I've written about in a lot of things. It's like, I want super intimate relationships right now. Like, period, end of story. I have no interest in superficiality.
Yeah.
Done. And it's funny to like look at, like, I don't even, text messages to me now have become the new email. Like, I'm like, if you really want to talk to me and have a genuine connection, pick up the phone. Like,
Yeah.
pick up the phone, let's have a call. Like, a text to me is like, people send me texts about my business, people send me texts about, logistics stuff. And so like, I guess it started with the text is like, I'm like, this to me is just like, it's like a to-do list, my texting app. It's like a to-do list of like, I get this done. It's not how I connect with people, and nor is Instagram or LinkedIn. I mean, I really look at it as it is a marketing function for getting my writing out there, getting my speaking out there. I know it helps people. I mean, that's kind of what motivates me to stay involved with it is like, I know it helps people. Like I get messages all the time about like it's interesting. Actually, somebody sent me a LinkedIn comment today about like, I love that I can connect with you from afar and learn from you from afar. right? I had posted a 45-second video clip of a speaking engagement I did. And like, that's meaningful, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that is, and so that kind of keeps me motivated to play the game, quote unquote, is, I know my message is helping people. And so it's like, you got to play the game to kind of get your message out there. If you want to get your message out, or I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me, I'm like, if I want my message to be out there helping people, I've got to kind of, play this game, meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, maybe you're figuring it out, and it's not a flaw of mine, or
no,
it's just it's weird. I peek my head out like I'm a groundhog or something, and just I certainly will post. It's strange. I don't know. Let me try and figure out how to articulate it. I think my main goal is to be a better writer, a better communicator, a better songwriter, a better podcaster. And I'm not where, look, a friend of mine said I should be on NPR, and I would love that. I think that
you'd be great on NPR.
thank you. But I don't know if this is the insecurity in me, but I do think about like time in a day, and I need to devote more time towards my craft of songwriting and speaking, communicating and writing, because I'm not. So I always get a little weary, like, Eddie, don't spend too much time on social media, because you still need to improve your skills as a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's 100% right. And to be honest with you, I don't really spend that much time on social media. Like, and we've talked about this, like, I don't even watch that much TV. Like, I watch maybe a couple hours of TV a week. Maybe.
Yeah.
And to me, it all boils down to energy, right? Like, what gives you energy and what doesn't give you energy? And like, yeah, have there been periods in my life where social media has not given me energy, or are there, I see certain posts and it doesn't give me energy? 100%. And it's like, okay, if I'm feeling that, I need to pay attention to that. But I think what gives me energy is helping people. And when I see that my writing or my speaking is helping people, that gives me a lot of energy. And so, like, being able to transcend kind of how I look at social media is like, it's not like an extension of my soul, if that makes sense. And I guess that's what I was getting at with the real thing. Like, it's not like Instagram is not my soul. It's not like the top 5 closest people to me in my life know, like, the inner Emily. This is like, it's an authentic kind of piece of me, but it's not all of me. Yeah, I don't know if that isn't a complete thought, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. Do a lot of Kundalini yoga, Eddie. I do a lot of like meditations, and maybe that's what's helping.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess the last sort of area. I think our lives are heavily influenced, and one could say, Eddie, you focus too much thought and awareness towards social media and technology. But when I take a step back and think about how much of our lives technology has seeped into, and it's weird. I think about like when the television came around, there were 3 channels, and we had those 3 channels for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And then cable came along after 30 years of just having, and it could have been even longer. Cable came along very slowly. And then we only had HBO and Showtime for 10 years. And I think it's like we had time to sort of digest them and implement them on our own terms into our lives.
Yeah.
And now it just feels like the technology is this living, breathing entity that whether you want it to or not, it's like the blob. It's just like covering.
Yeah.
And so that's just, and I sense it in, in my life. And I think I'm just very thoughtfully aware and thinking about how it can distract me or change my emotionality. Or, I just went on vacation and I took photos, but I certainly didn't post anything on Instagram while I'm away, because knowing my personality, it is going to take me away from that moment of being on vacation. And and I think it's almost pernicious. I know pernicious sort of has this negative connotation to it, but it I think it's stripping a lot of the intrinsic, deeper core values away, and I guess I'm just very cautious with how I add it into my life.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that's what all of us should be doing with anything in our lives, right? Is being intentional about how we're adding it in. I mean,
Yeah.
I say this to a lot of people. It's like you are the sum of the, you know, five people you hang out with or talk with the most, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you are heavily, just like technology, like the people you surround yourself with, you're going to be heavily influenced by them, good, bad, the other. And so, I think what you're doing with technology is the model all of us should use for anything, right? It's like, let me be thoughtful about who I'm hanging out with a lot. Like, are we doing things that are giving me energy and helping me grow? Or is this person, taking me back? Like, those are questions I ask myself. And then I think on the technology side, like, you aren't wrong. I mean, things, society is moving so fast now. I mean, and I think my takeaway is I don't think there's any way to escape it. I think the cat is out of the bag, the horse has left the barn, like whatever
Yeah.
analogy there is, but it's like social media is not going anywhere. It's and it's like neither is technology. I mean, neither is AI. Like none of this is going anywhere. And so the question is, how do you transcend it or figure out a way to work with it without um, diminishing kind of your energy and your power.
I went through a lot of health issues as a kid. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. This will transition to sort of current and also health. And I think it left a lot of mental scars. I think when something happens to you as a child, it could be divorce, it could be health, it could be losing a parent at a young age. I think it leaves a scar. And I've been through a journey of finding balance and mental health and confidence and strength. And I've been off medication for over 25 years, and I'm really a big advocate of eating well and exercising every day. And people have said, I'm like a victory story, and my story should be shared. And but it's weird. Like I often think of I almost don't even know who that person was anymore. And in fact, I've been wondering if I've even been wondering if my physical ailment was a result of mental sort of toxicity and anxiety in the air. Did I believe the illness was there, but did it come from sort of underlying anxiety that was never diagnosed? And so I guess my question is well, I guess there's a couple, like, when did you feel like your story, your path was something that you felt that you should be talking about and sharing? And I guess this sort of leads to something we talked about on the phone a few weeks ago, was like, sometimes I wonder, like, part of the reason why I feel like I stopped talking about my health issues and getting over them is that I don't want to be a part of that person anymore. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm a new Eddie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a lot there, but
There's a lot there. I mean, I love everything you just said. I love this. I think the first thing I want to touch on, because I've been obsessed with this recently, is you may have seen, I wrote a little something about this. I listened to this great podcast with Aubrey Marcus and Aaron Rodgers, like Packers Aaron Rodgers.
Sure.
And they were talking about, they had both been to Greece and they had done this like healing tour. And they talked about like, it's almost sort of a lost art of the ancient Greeks, where they were, I think it was in Ephesus. And, they learned about how what the Greeks believed about healing was like they healed the spirit first. And so like they talked about, how ritualistically people would, walk around a temple or do different rituals. Then they worked on the mind. And then lastly, the body, which I think is so interesting, because you talk about, or, I think what I heard you talk about was like, was there that mental component to what was manifesting physically for you?
Yeah.
I certainly believe that for myself. Like I certainly, it's funny. I can't remember how much we talked about this last time. I don't think we talked about healing a ton. I think we talked more about dating.
Yeah.
But the heal. So I have been working with an osteopath for probably 2 years now. I've been seeing osteopath every couple of weeks. And for people listening, like I had no idea what an osteopath was until I really moved to California. It was nothing I had been exposed to I grew up on the East Coast. And, the osteopaths work on a lot of my involuntary nervous system. And, I went to, it's kind of a funny thing because like I went to see the first doctor I saw, he said, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I want to walk like everyone else. Like I want to walk without a limp. I want to walk in a way that like uses my energy appropriately, right? Because yes, like I get around just fine, but there is an element to this that I think about, like as I grow older, the wear and tear on my body.
Yeah.
There is a very real element to this of if I can make some small tweaks to my gait, it may give me more energy. It may prevent some bone, wearing down of bones, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I've been working with these osteopaths for a while now. And I think that plus I've been doing Kundalini yoga regularly for about a year now. And before that, I was doing it kind of once a month here and there. Those two combined have had such significant shifts on me mentally that I think when the mental shifts happen, the physical shifts are easier to make. And my osteopath said this a couple weeks ago. He said, they were working on my sacrum. I think they do a lot of work on like the sacrum, which is like, in the pelvic region, like center of the hips. And he has students who work with him. And he said to one of the students, he said, you did a great job freeing up her, I don't know, some kind of C1, C2, something in the spinal thing. And he said, his point was, he was like, you did a great job of freeing up the tension up there. And she needs that freed up because when that's freed up, she can focus on bending her knee more, lifting her ankle, like, because it's, again, like it's all back to this energy, right? Of like the mental and the physical are so connected of like, I think I've had to heal mentally before I could heal a lot of things physically. And this goes back to dating actually, right? It's like, I wasn't in a place to date somebody until I like mentally got myself kind of out of that um trauma place, right? Of
Yeah.
like, I kind of had to like get over that some of those mental hurdles. So
Did
I'll
you?
pause there because
Th-
that's a lot.
yeah. Well, did you feel? And this is something that I've been struggling with too. Just some other health issues have come up recently. Did you feel like the Western world of medicine sort of
hmm
like just said, "This is how you're going to be for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
There's nothing we can really do for you."
I do.
So
I
that's what they're so. And here, my point is that I guess, and I got so frustrated with the world of COVID, and I know that word is very triggering to people, but it just,
yeah.
I don't like the world of the West where it's just take these pills,
Yeah.
and there's not much else I can do. But I was just curious, how that happened with you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny. You probably haven't seen this, but I have a video clip that I came out a couple of weeks ago. Verizon put it out because I did some work with Verizon and some of their startups they're sponsoring. And literally, it's a direct quote from the video where I say, like, I felt like the medical world 30 years ago after my brain injury said, this is how you're going to walk, and this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, and I accepted that. I didn't even think to question it. And so back to your original or your question a couple of minutes ago about my story and why it matters is like I think I've started to see, or why I wanted to talk about it is I've started to see so many positive benefits of healing myself through osteopathy and these other things that I'm doing. And I'm like, holy shit, like no one knows about this. And like if I can change one child's life by talking, their parent hears me talking about some kind of new healing modality, like a lot of the healing modalities I'm trying right now, like they would have dramatically changed my life if I had known about them when I was 8. And my life has been the way it is for a reason. And, there is, I'm very much a believer in, the universe's timing and things happen, hopefully in alignment with kind of our highest destiny. And I think I very much have a story that probably people could benefit from hearing about and will hopefully help them. But yeah, I mean, some of these healing modalities I'm learning about are just incredible. And, I don't know if it's a product of where I grew up. I don't know if it's a product of, it's probably a product of that, probably a product of like people didn't ask as many questions. People just didn't know about these kind of modalities. Like, and that is what it is. But one thing I just want to share real quick is I'm super excited actually, because next week I'm going, I don't even know if I told you this. I'm going to Oaxaca.
Where?
And Oaxaca in Mexico.
Okay.
And I'm working with a woman who's an indigenous Mayan healer.
Wow.
And I'm spending 2 days with her, and she's going to do like an energetic cleanse with me. She's going to take me on a soul journey, and she's going to do a temescal with me, which is like a traditional Mayan kind of steam ritual.
That sounds amazing.
I'm so excited, Addie. I can't even tell you. Like, I think it's going to be life changing because, and she, back to kind of your original point here, we've talked a little bit over WhatsApp, and I told her a little bit about like, she's like, what are you looking for? What do you want? What do you want to get out of this experience? And so I told her some of my story, and her response, and I just told her the facts. I didn't give her my interpretation of anything, but her response was, she said, I think there are some things going on mentally and energetically, and potentially, what she sees is like from past lives that may be affecting you physically, and it's just, you can't, regardless of whether you believe in past lives, I think, I mean, I can't deny that like there are things that go on mentally that, affect your ability to change things physically.
Yeah, I mean, I think there I think we've been raised into a world of systems and sort of the system of healthcare, for better or for worse, has been lionized. And I don't know if it's because they go to school longer than most people. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's because of the uniform. And look, clearly there's great doctors.
Yeah.
But there was this guy on the Bill Maher show where he was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and the doctors were offering suggestions and nothing was working. And then finally he went, through his own desires, started seeking alternative
Yeah.
modalities. And I think for the vast majority of people, a lot of what doctors suggest works.
Yeah.
But I think there's nuance, and I think look, I could go to one yoga teacher and there's just sort of this warmth about her that like instantly I connect with, and she makes me feel
Yeah.
better. But you could go to the same person and not feel the same thing. I mean, it's so,
Right.
there's just such a complexity to the human species. And I
Yeah.
think we are selling ourselves short as a species culturally if we're only taking one perspective and not exploring all these other modalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one size does not fit all.
No.
Like, no. And I agree with you. The neurosurgeon who operated on me at age 8 probably saved my life, right? Like, I mean, he's an incredible human. There are incredible doctors and nurses out there in kind of the, allopathic, which is the more traditional medicine realm. But I think the point is there are alternatives to that work for people that are not mainstream. And it's funny. I think we talked a little bit about one of the books I'm working on is around this idea of value and what our society values and how I have lived a life of, what people would conventionally call not value. Right. Like a lot of people would say to you, having a physical disability is not a valuable way to live your life. I would completely disagree. Like it has brought so much value to me that I, can go on for hours about. But I think that, the other example of this is like alternative medicine or holistic medicine, I'll call it, is like that is not seen, at least in the United States, conventionally as something valuable to look into. And I have this vision, and I don't know how it's going to manifest. I don't know if it's a podcast where I talk about these different modalities I've tried. There's a lot of important stuff here, and it's the same modality does not work for everyone. To your point, like I've tried Reiki. Like Reiki is a good example. A lot of my friends love Reiki. It doesn't do it for me. Like it's okay, but
Yeah.
it's not the same effect that I get from osteopathy. But I have to share the story because I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he's been in a wheelchair for 12 years. He went to a seminar with Joe Dispenza, who is a doctor, and he did a walking meditation. I mean, he literally did a walking meditation. And I asked him yesterday, I said, how long can you do that? And he can do a walking meditation for an hour now. I mean, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
Like that's incredible. And the funny thing is, I asked him. I said something to the effect of like, were you not able to do this before Dispenza's workshop? And he said, I don't know because I didn't try. Like I didn't think I could. Right. And that really resonated with me because I'm very much the same way of like what's a good example? Like like for a long, long time, I didn't think I could get up off the floor leading with my left foot, which is my weaker foot. I thought I always had to do it with the right. And I don't think I ever tried because when I was a child, a PT literally pushed me to the ground over and over again to teach me to get up on the right side because they thought, and they're not wrong. Like they knew that it was better for me to fall on the right side because the bones are stronger, not as likely to break. So they taught me to fall on the right side, and then they taught me to get up from the right side. They're not wrong, but like the effect of that is I didn't establish those kind of neural pathways in my brain to get up on the left side, right? And so back in the fall, I was leaving something in a neighbor's mailbox, hopped off his steps without thinking, fell, was so embarrassed because I didn't want him to come out of the house and see me on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Like, what? Here I am. That I just quickly hopped up on the left. And it wasn't until after the fact that I was like, oh my God, I just got up I'm leading with my left foot. And so now, to this connection to this story about meditation, it's like, I just believe there are some things that we are programmed to think we're not capable of. We perceive them as limitations, but we are capable of them.
You brought up an interesting point that I've thought of. Like, clearly, what was the diagnosis that you had when you were a kid? What was it, a stroke?
Similar to a stroke. So it was an abnormal vascular malformation.
Okay.
Which is essentially that the brain formed oddly. And so there was this abnormal malformation in the brain stem. And so because the brain had formed oddly, it started to bleed. And so then that was the issue, is that it was bleeding. And here, actually, Addie, here's a prime example. And kudos to my parents here, because so when it started bleeding, we were I was with my dad and my brother in outside of DC at Mount Vernon, which is a historical site. And
how old are you here?
I was 8.
And it's weird the way hold on, the way you're saying, the way you're saying it, like when my brain started bleeding, one would think about like a cut in their arm, and I would see the blood coming out of my arm, but you weren't aware that it was bleeding at this point.
I was not consciously aware, but it's a fascinating story because, so we're at Mount Vernon, and I fell and started limping, no doubt because the brain was bleeding, right? And it's getting all over, the blood's getting all over everything.
Well, wait, hold on. I'm sorry, and please don't forget, I'm just asking questions.
No, this is great.
Did you fall because there was the bleeding in the brain, or did you fall and hit your head and then that caused the bleeding?
I love this question, and I love it because I had never thought about this until I think it's actually a healer that I've started to work with, an incredible healer. She does myofascial healing. She's up in Reseda. She's incredible. I started working with her about a month ago, and she asked me the same question. And I was like, I'm not sure, because the post-op paperwork says that the night before the night before all this happened, I had been roughhousing with my brother, and I had hit my head. But like nobody had any sort of definitive answer on this, right? So, roughhousing the night before, next day I fall, start limping. What happened? And this woman, she's just incredible. She said to me, okay, would you remember falling? And I said, yeah, I do. Like, I remember falling. She said, well, how did you fall? And I said, well, I fell forward. Like, I remember falling forward on the ground at Mount Vernon. And she's like, well, then, Emily, your brain was already bleeding. Like, because you didn't hit your head. Like, because my injury's in the brainstem, which is the back of the head. She was like, you didn't hit the back of your head when you fell.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, fascinating. But love this woman because she's, so thoughtful. But anyway, fell, started limping. My dad didn't really think anything of it. What kids fall all the time. And then we got to the hotel where we were staying, and he asked me to press the elevator button. And at that point, I reached across my body with my right arm, and I grabbed my left arm and lifted it up and moved it forward to push the elevator button.
Wow.
I know. And at that point, my dad was like, oh shit, this is not good. But so 2 points I want to make. is it gives me chills to this day to read this. I have the post-op paperwork from when this happened. This is 93. It was a long time ago. And all the notes are like handwritten. It's like, the documentation is not great, but I've read the notes. And when they interviewed my dad, when the neurologist eventually interviewed my dad, he is quoted as saying that he asked me after I fell if my wrist was bothering me. And my little precious 8-year-old self said, no, there's something else wrong.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just it gives me chills, right? So no, I didn't probably consciously could verbally say my brain is bleeding. But I just, to me, that's whenever I doubt myself, I think back to that, right? I think, Emily, you knew, you knew even then that there was something bigger wrong. And and so it's, I have these, moments now in my career where I'm I know this is going to happen. I just have this feeling that this is going to happen at some point, or I'm going to meet this person, or I'm going to reconnect with this person. There's, and I find myself the thing I'm working on is doubt will creep in, right? It's oh, Emily, how do you know that? And then I try and remind myself no, I do. There is some deep inner knowing that I think we all have, or at least I question that sometimes. So,
well, the thing that I'm resonating, the thing I'm resonating with, and you said it earlier, is how you value. You've grown to value, and I don't mean to put words into your mouth, but you've grown to value the disability, quote unquote, because it's made you who you are, and and I feel. I certainly didn't feel like this in my teens and my early 20s when I had a relapse and was dealing with my autoimmune condition again. But, now as I reflect back and I'm older, I appreciate who it's turned me into.
Yeah.
Look, I've got major hypochondria. I certainly have anxiety issues. And I think, speaking to my friends, if you're sort of home base, quote unquote, or if it's uprooted, if you're not feeling emotionally stable or trusting that things are going to go okay, and I'm not particularly very religious, I think it's hard for a lot of people to trust that everything's going to be okay. I can often go to the worst is going to happen, and I hate that about me. But I understand why I'm that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I was that way too. I mean, I think it's Oprah has this book with Dr. Bruce Perry, I think is his name, came out last year about it's called What Happened to You. And they say in the book, they're the earlier the trauma, the basically more work it is to rise above it, right? I think that's what you're hitting at.
And sort of my earlier point, as a kid, when you're asking that question and even thinking, what was the cause of the brain injury? And back then when I was 12, when I was going through the health stuff, I don't even know if I was aware to ask the questions, or I just sort of succumbed to, this is my life. This is how it is.
Correct.
But now that I'm older and I'm really thinking about who I am and how the mental plays such a role, I've really been reflecting and thinking about. Look, I'm not denying that these autoimmune conditions exist, but I've got other friends that have recently been diagnosed with lupus or RA. Yeah. They were all in a very anxious state of mind, be it a new child, be it a work, be it a moving, and lo and behold, they are diagnosed with an autoimmune condition.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that my takeaway is I think there's a lot here that's under-researched, and I think there's a lot we don't know about the connection between the mental and the physical. And it's my mother has very severe early onset Alzheimer's, and it did not run in our family. This kind of came out of the blue. right? And so I've been doing a lot of research into this, and there's so much emerging research on the effects of meditation to prevent Alzheimer's, the effect of listening to like a mantra. There's some really interesting work out of UCLA by a woman who is like playing mantras for people with Alzheimer's, like Asian mantras, and it's helping them. And this guy, Doc Amen, just did a bunch of work on. He has a book coming out about this, about like Alzheimer's, and obviously it's a brain disease, but like how anxiety affects it, and how diet and alcohol affects, different things affect it much more than having the gene. And one point I wanted to make, going back to what we were saying earlier about questioning, is my parents, like, God bless them. It's, so when my brain started bleeding, we went to Fairfax Hospital, General Hospital, it's in like Virginia, and they stopped the bleeding. And as we're leaving, they said, they were like, well, all the best to you. We hope it doesn't bleed again. I know. I mean, I'm like, my parents are like, fuck. Like,
yeah, that's nice, right? Nice words of encouragement.
Thanks,
yeah.
Right. And so, then like by, Providence, we got connected to, a family friend knew a very, kind of prominent neurologist up at Massachusetts General in Boston, which is, and Mass General is just continues to do, kind of renowned neuroscience work. And got on, she connected us, and this pediatric neurologist called my parents later that day, and he was like, this is like a dire situation. You need to get her up here immediately. Right. And so like, then we go to Boston, and thankfully we had the resources to be able to do that, like people to take care of my siblings and the money to get up there and all this. And that's when in Boston, that's when they said, all right, we're operating and taking this thing out, because if we don't, it could bleed over and over again. And she won't know, it could, it could get a lot worse, right? It could be mortal. And so back to that point, like, it's like, we really have to advocate for ourselves. And like at that age, I couldn't advocate for myself. And thankfully my parents did. And this family friend, right, who had that connection. But it's scary to me. And, to kind of put a bow on what we were talking about earlier, like, that's one of the reasons I tell my story, is because it breaks my heart to think of a little child, like, who needs this information and doesn't have it. It's just heartbreaking.
Do you know how rare what happened to you is?
I couldn't give you a number, but it's very rare. I mean, it's I talk about this with my current osteopath, because he and I have been on, he calls it the hunt, quote unquote. Like, we've been on a hunt for like 2 years to find people who can actually help me. Like, and he's had me going to like an orthotist. He's had me going to like, I mean, I've talked to so many expert, and he told me, he's like, you're going to write a book that's like a healing database for people based on everything you've done. And I've invested thousands of dollars into this because, needless to say, of course, insurance doesn't cover osteopathy or the myofascial work or any of this. But I'm doing it because I think it's important. And, anyway, my osteopath, he was like, the experts, like, your case is so specialized that, like, there's not an expert. And the challenge we come up against is a lot of people are so specialized in their medical profession, right? They're focused on feet, or they're focused on arms, or they're focused on skin, or they're focused on the brain. They're so specialized that they don't think systematically about how it's going to affect me, right? And so that's one of the things that we continue to look for and have discussions about, is like, for instance, somebody wanted me recently to get a surgery to lengthen my left heel cord, because the idea is like, if they lengthen the heel cord, my left heel will hit the ground when I walk, which will then affect, enable me to have a better gait and not put as much strain on my toe. So it's like, okay, well, kind of isolated, that sounds correct. But then my osteopath is like, okay, but let's think about this holistically. Like, you have walked like this for 30 years. Like, if we do that kind of a dramatic change to you, like, is that going to make things better, or is it going to make you unable to, how big of an impact is that going to make? And so it's hard to find. I think within the medical community right now, what I'm finding is like everyone is so specialized, and my case is so rare. But like, let's not just focus on me. Like, tons of people have rare medical things. Like, to your point, like one size doesn't fit all. And I think, COVID is showing us, and like other things are showing us, like new diseases and new complications are popping up every day.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been like this interesting journey of like, everyone is so specialized that I'm my best advocate. Like, I know my body better than anyone. And I like will make every decision about my body. Like, I'm very big on that. And it's like, because I've lived in this body and I have studied it actively for 30 years. And like, but it's, I don't know. It's, I guess what I'll say to wrap this up is like, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of awareness. And it is this like kind of unending search for what is the right healing modality. And I don't think, my takeaway here is like, I don't think this is unique to me because of my physical differences. Like, I think everyone probably should go through a similar journey to some extent. Because getting back to that, mentally, we all have things going on, patterns that we need to change. And the modality that works for me is not going to work for you, right?
Yeah.
It may, but it may be a combination. It could be something completely different. And I think, that's what I'm trying to have people take away is like, yeah, I mean, a lot of what I'm experiencing in the physical is interesting, but like, there's a message here for everyone. Like, we all have, perceived kind of limitations that we have to work through.
Yeah. And I think you were just inspiring me to say, just in closing, I think that's ultimately sort of, look, I live my own life. I've never felt comfortable offering advice. I'm a firm advocate in believing that people need to find their own way. And you could tell somebody that they need help or this would work, but ultimately it's going to take them on the inside to make that decision for themselves, to see an acupuncturist or a therapist or whomever. But I do think we all have that power to make our own decisions, have an awareness, but sort of in full circle, I think one of the sort of underlying symptoms or effects of this influx of tech is that it is changing people's ability to slow down, tune in, understand their own thoughts and beliefs, and is it really their own, or is it some algorithm that path that they were down? So that's why I think that these are important discussions, because if more people are not making their own decisions and they're being led down these algorithmic paths, we're going to end up speaking to sort of two-dimensional zombie versions of actual human beings. So
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I 100% agree. I mean, I think it's,
Is there anything for you to plug or anything new or that you want to share before I let you go?
Anything new that I want to plug? Yeah. So actually on this discussion, well, I don't know when this podcast will come out, but, I'm actually having a conversation about a lot of this on September 18th.
It'll come up before that. All right, cool.
Okay, lovely. So I'm going to be in New York that week, and my leadership coach and I are actually having a discussion about healing modalities at our yoga studio in New York. It's on the Lower East Side, Rama, New York City. And it's a conversation about healing modalities and how there are two meditations that I've used, Kundalini yoga meditations that I've used to kind of reset my brain and reset some of my patterns. So that's happening. There's not an RSVP up yet, but there will be. And then I'm speaking, I think this is hot off the press, but I think I'm going to speak at DC Startup Week earlier that week. So it'd be on September 15th. And this is completely other side of the spectrum, but I'm talking about one of my research areas is the effect of diversity, equity, inclusion, and kind of social justice movements, like the intersection of that on employer brand and on products. And so I'm gonna do a session on that at DC Startup Week, and that's that. We can't even get into that because we'd go off. Well, it'd be a whole another hour.
It's a whole other world.
It is, yeah.
So we're gonna say bye, but don't actually hang up, because then I want to tell you something. Well, Emily, as always, it's great to have these fascinating, enlightening discussions with you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
It's such a pleasure. I love our chats very much.
I'll speak to you very soon.
Okay,
all right.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.